capability in the 1990s. What we had was Bob Dockery and his homemade darkroom in the backyard of his house in Stockton, which meant he worked at night when it was cool enough, and in the wintertime when he could heat it. Bob never turned down a request from us to take a photograph which we found or bought, or a postcard, and make it into a really nice photograph, one that we could find detail and learn from. He was also very shy and didn't have a lot of social poise, so he was very reluctant to stand in front of a group like this. And it took me about 5 years to get him to agree to make a presentation at the year 2000 symposium. About two weeks before the symposium, I got a telephone call from Bob, and I thought sure he was going to bail. What he said to me was, "Charlie, I'm really concerned that I don't have enough material." And I said, "Bob, how many slides do you have?" He said, 214. And he was serious. He did cut that down to 126. And that's what you're going to see today, Bob Dockery's slides from the year 2000 symposium. We may not get through all 126, but we'll try. I have the other 105 back home, which I can show you next year if you like. Bob did several things which are unique. Those of you might remember we had a presentation some years ago by the fellow, and I forget his name, who did the book on the Central Pacific right-of-way then and now. And Bob began a project to do that for the V&T, a project which was cut short by his unexpected death. So you're going to see some of those photographs. He liked to take them then and now and sometimes put them on the same picture. The other thing that he did was unique was that he and Ed Barnhart rented a helicopter back in the 1990s, and they flew for an hour over the V&T right-of-way, and Barney took a video, which Tom has and maybe he'll show sometime. Bob took pictures, so you will see aerial photographs of what the V&T right-of-way looked like in the mid-1990s. I got up at 4 o'clock in the morning this morning, so you may have to remind me what some of these pictures are pictures of, because I'm not going to be real quick. And I'm going to sit here, because this is a quirky projector. It doesn't go backwards unless you kiss it. We still didn't get it as high as I'd like. Anybody got another book we could put under here?
Yeah, right there.
No, that'll melt that.
Not too much of a book?
We can fix that too. You guys forgot.
They don't make them like that anymore.
I don't know which way it makes it go down. There we go.
It's already telling you what.
It is a movie.
Anybody got a book?
Just hold the projector, Charlie.
There we go. Where there's a will, there's a way. Okay, this is a typical Dockery attempt. We've got looking down
Microphone.
Oh, sorry. This is a typical Dockery effort. At the top, you've got Gold Hills Main Street going all the way down to Silver City with the mines and the mills, and on the bottom, you've got how it looked sometime in the 1930s. I don't know why this picture is in here, but that's where it was. This is the big mill, the Kincaid mill that operated in the teens. Bob spent a lot of time finding these photographs. He was fascinated by mills and machinery as well as railroads. Here you have what Gold Hill looked like just after the mining got underway, I believe. Bob tried to record all of these things so that we wouldn't forget how they looked before we destroyed them. Yeah. Here is the Belcher Mine. This is a Watkins photo from the 1875-76 era. The railroad running through it almost, and the low line to the collar I'm sorry, the Crown Point just below it. And that's how that area looks now, or did. Hard to believe that we had all those people and all that work going on, and now all we have is a tourist train going through occasionally. Busy Gold Hill, 1875, 1876. Mike and Bob and I went to the California State Library and photographed every Watkins stereo card of the Comstock, and this is one of the pictures that Bob produced from that work. Washoe in the 30s, actually after the railroad. So you're right, I'm sorry. That is Gold Hill. Yep. There is Gold Hill once again. This time looking down from the divide.
Can we close the door over there?
I'm sorry this projector doesn't have a zoom. We could blow these up, but I'm limited by the electrical connection as to how far back I can move.
I think you can go.
Oh, good. Okay, how about that? This is one of the aerial photographs that Bob took when he and Ed Barnhart were in the air. That was, I believe, 1995 or 1996, and of course that's Gold Hill. Again, hard to believe that at one time there were 6,000 or 7,000 people living and working in there, and doing all those kinds of other things that people do. Another blow up from a Watkins stereo card. Bob was taking not 35 millimeter slides, he was taking either 4x6 or 6x8 box camera photographs, and we'd have to stop about every half hour so he could reload his film cartridges. In fact, we even had to go to the store and buy more film. But this is like 10% of the original stereo card, so you can see how clear his photography was. Another aerial of Gold Hill. With Bob Gray's railroad running. Another aerial, and you can see the extent of the mining. Being up in the air like this is a really different experience. You can see the original tunnel down there in the middle center, the lower middle, which has been daylighted, or which fell in when Bob attempted to open it. Thank you. Another aerial, and you can see the devastation. You really don't appreciate the devastation that the strip mining did until you stand back like this and see the entire area. The remains of the tailings from the Empire mine look very paltry compared to what the strip mining folks did with their bulldozers, or giant excavators, really. There's a different view of Gold Hill in a different time. Again, a Watkins photo. There up at the top on the left, you can see the Empire Imperial Mine tailings pile with the tailings tramway dumping over the railroad almost. That was that little pile that you saw earlier. And in 1875, 1876, it was a major feature in Gold Hill. That is Crown Point Ravine, or what used to be Crown Point Ravine.
Was that little tramway to the right, or a mine chute, or what?
That to the right is a dump for a mine that existed much after the Comstock was going great guns. It's been there as long as I've been up here.
It's where the yellow jacket used to be.
Yes, it's where the Yellow Jacket dump used to be. This was taken from a postcard. I always get a kick out of these colored postcards because modelers try to use them to decide how to paint their models. Most of these postcards were sent to Germany where they were hand lettered by people who'd never seen the original area. But they do give you an idea of what things looked like when they were going. You can see smoke and steam coming out of the Yellow Jacket mine down there in the ravine. That's what it looks like now.
Except there's a railroad there now. Yeah, that's early.
You have to remember when Bob took all of these, as they are now pictures, he was walking up hills carrying his giant box camera, a 35mm camera with color, a 35mm camera with black and white, and a backpack full of film. Mr. Watkins had 2 or 3 kids carrying his equipment.
No railroad, Charlie.
What half the bulldozer wrought. Bob was there when they tried to open the tunnel.
Yeah.
It just didn't stay that way.
Bob was a pretty good schmoozer. He could get people to tell him when they were going to do big things. And even though he was working for a living, he usually managed to get to that place and take a photograph. Quite a difference from the way it originally looked. But at least it didn't fall down this time.
That's the yellow jacket.
There's the East Yellow Jacket mine, the last attempt to try to get ore out of the Yellow Jacket claim. That is just on your right as you come out of that tunnel on the train. And I'm sure you recognize it from there. Every now and then there's some activity there. I'm not quite sure what they're doing, but as you can see, they spent a lot of masonry work putting in the foundations for the machinery. To my knowledge, that mine never produced anything but hot water. There's from the airplane, you can see the tunnel portal on the right. The V&T had a siding that went off just above the bottom of the picture into the mine area for delivering firewood and machinery. We don't have a picture that shows that very clearly, however.
Did the right of way follow the kind of the side of the hill there off to the left, Charlie?
No. The right of way for the railroad, you could see going into the tunnel, there was just a switch off just about 100 yards from the tunnel that made a sharp curve along the side of the hill there.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, thank you. And of course, that's the Utah. And there is the long gone tunnel underneath the highway.
That's part of the ward shaft.
I'm sorry, it's the ward shaft, yes, pardon me. state of Nevada made it illegal to have covering over the mine shaft hoist equipment as a fire protection measure, so all of the mines had to tear down the buildings over their mine shaft hoists.
That's the lower shaft.
And that's what it looked like when the V&T began to run again. That might be the 8, I don't really know. But obviously Bob made an arrangement to have them make the black smoke. Now you're standing where that mine shaft was. Again, an arrangement for smoke. And there, just to the lower left, you see what the mine area looks like now with the reconstructed V&T going under the highway. Bob was always fascinated with the Julia mine. I don't know why. We talked about it several times, and he just thought that it wasn't very well known, so he tended to dig into things like that. The water tanks for the V&T at Virginia City, and the engine house, of course, is over here. Again, 1875, 1876. This is in the 1880s or 1890s. Here's the engine facility. Maybe that's even later than that. That might be the 30s. And of course, this is where the Julia was. Not a hint there.
You got all eight stalls in the roundhouse too.
Yeah.
Would be earlier than that.
And there's the aerial of the same thing now. I believe at times masonry foundations appear in this area now and then when it rains or when somebody decides to steal some tailings, but virtually nothing left. Julia went down very deep, made a lot of water, a very small amount of ore. Now we're following the railroad in past the roundhouse into Virginia City. Well-known photograph. We stretch our imaginations, it's the same train from the other end. Okay, where are we now? Got a big mine tailings dump.
I don't know, there's not enough stuff around.
Oh. Isn't that the round, isn't that Bob Gray's shops? So this is the V&T coming in, going around the hill. So this would be the Collar Potosi mine dump. And there's the mine dump for the Hale & Norcross. Hale & Norcross mine, Savage mine, spur running up behind dump wood here. That went on to the Collar Potosi eventually. I think this is one of the Sutro Tunnel mine shafts. Ventilation shafts. This is later on when the V&T was hauling tailings down to this area, and then they went by tramway further down the hill. But again, this is Bob's attempt to show us that same area later on after the mines were abandoned. that its deep mining was abandoned. There's the Hale and Norcross. This is the siding that went to the Collar Potosi mine dump. These guys are wondering what the hell that guy with the big box is doing, pointing it at them.
Actually, I thought that was you, Charlie.
B&B crack crew.
For a day, it might be worthwhile to go back there. Unfortunately, we wouldn't have a camera though.
What do you got there?
Whoop.
It doesn't get money.
Okay, this is the low line coming down to the Con Virginia in later times. Let me see if I can back this up because I think well, it doesn't want to do it. I think the other the picture that we're not getting shows this area before that reservoir was in. As you can see by the color of the water, water pollution control was becoming to be an issue eventually. Here is the low line going into the east, the I Street or J Street tunnel. I always forget which letter it is. As the railroad was coming down the hill here, down the embankment, into the tunnel underneath the street, down to the Con Virginia, off to the right.
Washington Street.
Washington Street. This is Bob's other picture of it much later in life. The tunnel hasn't been collapsed yet, but it is much later in time, as you can see by the lack of buildings. A lot of activity even this far down the hill. Cheap real estate further down the hill. Here is the Con Virginia. You can see the end of the tunnel here with the trout coming out. That track was eventually extended to the Union mine dump, ore dump over the long trestle. This is the Con Virginia before they tore the hoist building down. There was a side track that came in here to the ore dump. There's the famous postcard of the Con Virginia, colored by someone in Germany. But it does give you a feeling. The low line came in on this side, machinery and wood was stacked up over here, and I think this was the power plant. There's the extension of the low line over the trestle to the Union Consolidated Mine Dump. And this picture was taken after it was out of service because you can see it's sagging here in the middle. This is a picture Bob took when some of the people in this room went on a walk out to that area. We're standing at a grave from one of the V&T restoration crew people. And the low-line grade to the Union Consolidated Mine came down through here, which is, I think, why Bill wanted to be buried there. It is kind of remote, yet close to the railroad. You can see what the Ophir Mine tailings pile looked like before they started to make a baseball field out of it, or an RV park, whatever it is. That was taken about 1995, thereabouts. I think that was taken by something other than Bob, because I think that's Bob right there.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that looks like Bob.
And here's the upper track to the Union Consolidated Mine, where the wood came in, wooden machinery. The original of this was really kind of cloudy. I don't know how he did it. Whoops. What you just didn't see was a picture of the same area without the mine building, but this is how it looked later on when they tried to keep operating the mine and all the wooden buildings were gone. You can see the hoist shaft here. And of course, if you drive out there today, you'll see all the remains of the masonry foundations. Railroad came in right behind here. If you walk out there, you go by the Powder magazine, if I remember correctly, if it's still there. Bob was really fascinated by the giant pumps that the Union Consolidated Mine used, and this is a picture of them removing the pump. I believe they were the largest pumps of this type ever built. Again, the Union Consolidated made a lot of dirt, a lot of water, and for about a year or two it even made some ore.
Excuse me, how big of a diameter do you think that,
I knew at one time, but I'd be just guessing right now, but I would say on the order of 20 feet. And there's the aerial of that area. You can see where the mine was, and the railroad came in along here. Dug into this hillside is a cave with a stone front where they stored the powder. And the V&T's ore line came in below here. It's now under the pile. This, the Union Consolidated discovery was really the last hurrah of Mackey and Flood and company. They spent a lot of money trying to find ore on the north end. And when this didn't prove out to be a big bonanza, they gave up. Another picture of that area. There you can see the foundations, which are still there. The V&T line coming in through here into an ore dump, which is located right in here. And if Bob gave us a picture of that, you'll be able to see it. He did not yet. Here we're back up on the mountain, Mount Davidson, and you can see the trestle going out to the Union Consolidated. And you can see there's a car here. That car is actually derailed. The trestle is condemned, and nobody allowed out there with part of the railroad. This is the last reincarnation of the Consolidated, of the Consolidated Virginia Mine. There's the Ophir tailings dump, the Con Virginia Assay House, and the hotel. Here again, this has been published many times. It's a postcard. What's nice is that you can see a V&T flat car from the end. And if you blow that up, you can see the brake detail and the coupler detail. Back here is a string of ore cars waiting to get into the Ophir. This again is the last version of the Consolidated Virginia. The way that they ran these mines at the end was materials and went down here. Air came out here, and ore came out of the California shaft, the Consolidated Virginia California shaft, down the hill. There's the other side of the Consolidated Virginia mine in its last version. I do not think it was still operating at this time, but everything was at least still there. Just waiting for some HO scale modeler to build it. And that's what it looked like after it burned. The fate of most of the mine buildings in Virginia City. They either went down because their lumber was valuable, or they went down because somebody lit a fire. The first stage of redevelopment in any well-run community. Nice thing about this picture is look over here. Here's our caboose with its short-lived cupola. Here's the track down to the Ophir. The Ophir is over here, obviously. It's lost its shaft house as well. And there's the Ophir, one of my favorite structures. This elevator and the elevator in the International Hotel were the only elevators in Virginia City. The ore dump, of course, was on this switchback, which led off to the Consolidated Virginia ore house as well.
Is that looking north?
Yes, that's looking north. You might be on the freight house platform or close by. Here is the Virginia City panorama from up the hill. You can see the freight depot, the car shed, and the passenger depot. All Bob did was blow it up down here so you could see that in more detail. Here's the roundhouse way off in the distance. That's why an HO scale model is 50 feet long, to get all that in. Here is the spur to Heather's Field Yard. Consolidated Virginia Mine. Bob also liked Virginia City. Many of the day, he would get up very early before there were cars on the streets and go photograph the buildings as they were during his lifetime. This was obviously not one of those.
Probably the 30s.
Well, this sidewalk was built in the 1870s after the fire, so that people wouldn't fall down the hill. And got a gas street light. So again, it's after the 1875 era.
What street is that, Charlie?
I'm sorry?
What street is that?
This is, well, the railroad's right down here. So that must be, what, D Street?
Yeah.
D Street. Yes. The question was, yes, that's the Frederick Hotel's downhill side. And there's a better view of the Frederick Hotel. Another one of Bob's favorite buildings. This is the north end of the East Street Tunnel. The spur line going off to the passenger station, main line going on. The International Hotel is still there, behind it. And just one building starting to lean a little bit. This is the famous Indian poker game. Bob bought this picture because the Frederick House was back there, but he didn't have the heart to remove the locals. More Frederick House near the end. Quite an imposing structure, actually. The International Hotel gets all the publicity, but that really was a pretty unique building. This is an enlargement that Bob made of the picture that shows the station and the train and everything else. think at the time I was trying to do a drawing of that car shed, and so he made that picture to give me a better idea of what the filigree woodwork was around the entrance to the car shed. We later found it, of course, in the valuation drawings, but it's always nice to see what you can.
I thought you was interested in the ladies.
According to the newspapers, the railroad was forced to fence this side because these ladies would take their parasol and walk down the side of the car with the end of their parasol on the side of the car, because it went clickety, 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 clicky over the seams of the planking. And after repainting the car a few times, they decided they had to keep the ladies out. So vandalism is not anything of the modern day. There's the street side of the car shed, but you can see the fences, the anti-lady fences. We went quite a while before we found a picture of this side of the car shed. I don't know why it was so hard to find, but I think Stephen had one, and then others began to pop up. That was excellent for drawing the building because you got everything in perspective from this side. Bob never said no about getting funny pictures so people could draw drawings. Winter in Virginia City. I think this must have been after that snowplow train came through. Never figured out what they did with the snow, but
Wait until spring and it'll melt.
okay, we're back to the postcards. Looking up the street here. So this is a modern view. It's the remains of the Ophir. You can see here the switchback that went past the Ophir dump to the Con Virginia ore dump. And that looks like the passenger station is still there. Well, where are we looking at now? I think we're looking at the same thing, but just from a different angle. Yeah, there's the Ophir, there's the church, there's the railroad yards in here. Bob probably blew this up, and I probably have the negative somewhere, just haven't gotten around to scanning it and doing something with it. This is from the 30s, just before abandonment, I believe. I think Stephen's got one of these pictures from the excursion trips. Of course, this is the north end of the tunnel, passenger station. And not a lot of business. This may be after abandonment, they just haven't taken out the tracks yet. Busier times. Con Virginia Assay House, one of the CP locomotives here. Don't have a lot of pictures of them in freight service in Virginia City. Wish we could get rid of that smoke, but Bob wasn't able to do it.
This filter didn't work well.
Well, remember, Bob was working with chemicals and light. One of these days I'll scan that and see what we can do with Photoshop. Another recent, well, I should say 1930s, 1940s postcard. About the time I was born, 1938. In fact, my parents had a car that looked just like that. Another postcard view. Again, as much interesting for its automobiles as it is for the buildings, but it does give you a feeling for what it looked like about the time most of us were either born or at least gleams in our parents' eyes. Okay, this is a really good panorama. Here's the combination shaft, the railroad line into the combination shaft from the tunnel over here. It's greater downtown Virginia City. I believe this is the, that's either the, I think that's probably the Collard Potosi tailings dump, because there's the roundhouse. That means this is the Hale and Norcross. Yeah, there's the Hale and Norcross mine. You can see the wood yard here. V&T siding came up from the original station area, dropped wood down the hill to the boilers, then it then went on around to the Collard Potosi. We walked that about 20 years ago. I'm not sure how much of that siding is still there. Oh, where are we? Combination, yes. Here's the combination hoist bull wheels and so on, the railroad siding. And I guess this is what they call the $1 Million Highway. This is an aerial of Virginia City that he took on that helicopter trip. I think we've got a number of these that we can look at. Again, 1990s. It actually looks pretty clean and well kept then, not nearly as decrepit as you get walking down the street.
Distance makes it that.
This is the Opera House, the courthouse.
Boy, that went too far above the top of the
No.
steeple of the church.
You forget how steep that hillside really is until you walk up it. Here we go with the restored train. There's the 28. This is for those of you who get upset if there are no engine pictures. Again, you know who you are.
No smoke.
Reno. During the horse and buggy era. But we do have the more modern depot here with the V&T track coming around behind it on this way up. That's probably before the big fire, huh? A lot of those buildings went out in a fire. Love that picture. See, we have an engine, we have one of the caboose combines, a combine, and 2 passenger cars. That looks like number 17 maybe on the end because it's so long. And we're having a parade. Now, what the event, Stephen, if you're here, do you know what the event that was?
I think that was the Johnson Jeffries fight.
Was the fight?
Yeah. That's the B&T special.
Yeah. And the CP yardage over here. Much later in Reno. Everybody run out and see if that tree is still there. Again, for the locomotive people amongst us, Bob had a particular fascination with all of these pictures, which have been attributed at times to Stanley Palmer. They may or may not all be by him, but certainly some of them are. Going across the bridge in Reno. flour mill, which is long gone. V&T's water tank. A few years ago, we walked up to here and disturbed the bum who was asleep on the abutment. Now I think there's a motel or something on there, isn't there?
Yeah, I think so.
On the other side now.
Oh, that's still there.
Another great picture. The engine house in Reno. The turntable sitting over here, which probably was the original Reno turntable, or at least one of the original turntables that's been replaced by a more modern steel table. Wish we had a better picture of that tank car. It's modern enough times to have a fish belly flat car here. But the water tank's still there. And this is the sharpened version of the engine house, I think. Another with modern pictures. I don't think the V&T had a weed burner in their inventory. Looks like that, or it did when Bob was still alive.
It doesn't even look like that now.
Highballing into Reno. Not quite the same idea, but they tried. Nice thing about Bob's collection is that most of us would Photoshop that and cut everything out but the train. Bob looked at things like that and saw pictures, not train pictures. And without any fences, just having a train run down through Reno.
That's Holcomb Avenue.
Yes, Holcomb. Looks like that's in bloom, so it's probably spring, eh? That too.
That was one of their last excursions, I think. Stephen's got a bunch of pictures.
Here we're in Washoe Meadow. There's a whole string of these that were taken. And that's what it looks like now. Another picture of Reno. I'm not quite sure what we're looking at here. Again, the approach to Reno along the old highway. There were pieces of this track in place for quite a while, but the freeway's over here now. In California, you'd have to have a public vote over whether to cut down a tree like that. I guess it's easier here.
Yeah, they do it all the time.
Steamboat.